What if I told you that everything your pastor taught you about God was keeping you powerless? That the very beliefs designed to bring you closer to divine truth were actually creating separation? Joel Goldsmith discovered this shocking reality after years as a devoted Christian who found traditional teachings left him spiritually empty and desperate for real connection. The revolutionary mystic who transformed thousands of lives worldwide made a startling declaration that would shake the foundations of conventional Christianity. He proclaimed that most religious teachings about God create the very problems they claim to solve. Instead of bringing us closer to the divine, they build walls of separation, guilt, and powerlessness. Goldsmith's breakthrough came during his darkest hour, when traditional prayers failed him completely. In that moment of spiritual crisis, he discovered a truth so profound it would revolutionize his understanding of God forever. This wasn't the distant, judgmental deity of conventional religion, but an intimate, ever-present reality that required no intermediaries. This ancient secret, hidden in plain sight within Scripture itself, reveals why your prayers might feel unanswered and why spiritual breakthrough seems so elusive. Tonight, you'll discover the shocking truth that could transform your entire relationship with the divine and unleash your natural healing power. Traditional Christianity teaches you to worship a God who is separate from you, somewhere out there in heaven, judging your every move. This fundamental misconception creates the very sense of separation and unworthiness that keeps you from experiencing divine power. Goldsmith realized this external God concept was the root of spiritual impotence. When you pray to a distant deity, begging for help from outside yourself, you're actually affirming your separation from divine power. Every plea to an external God reinforces the belief that you are alone, powerless, and dependent on something beyond your reach. This creates a cycle of spiritual dependency that traditional religion perpetuates. The shocking truth Goldsmith discovered is that God is not separate from you, but is the very consciousness by which you know yourself. This isn't blasphemy, but the deepest Christian mystical teaching. When Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, he wasn't speaking metaphorically, but revealing the literal location of divine presence. Your pastor never told you this because the institutional church requires your dependence to maintain control. When you discover that divine consciousness is your own true nature, you no longer need intermediaries, rituals, or external validation. You become spiritually self-sufficient and divinely empowered. The lie goes deeper than you imagine. You've been taught that you're a sinner in need of salvation from outside yourself. This fundamental belief in your inherent unworthiness creates a spiritual wound that no amount of prayer or religious activity can heal. Goldsmith saw how this teaching destroys the very foundation of spiritual power. This doctrine of original sin isn't just wrong, it's spiritually destructive. When you believe you're fundamentally flawed and separated from God, you can never access the divine power that is your birthright. You remain forever dependent on external sources for what is already present within your own consciousness. The truth that will liberate you is this: you are not a sinner seeking God. You are divine consciousness temporarily forgetting its true nature. Every spiritual practice that reinforces your sense of unworthiness moves you further from the power you seek. Recognition of your divine nature is the key to instant spiritual transformation. Goldsmith proved this truth through miraculous healings that came not through begging God for help, but through the recognition of divine presence as one's own consciousness. When you stop seeing yourself as separate from divine power, that power flows through you naturally and effortlessly. Here's the secret your religious leaders don't want you to discover. Prayer doesn't work the way you've been taught. Petitionary prayer, asking God to change circumstances, actually reinforces the belief that God is separate from you and that your current experience is somehow outside divine will. This creates resistance to the very help you seek. True prayer, according to Goldsmith's revolutionary method, isn't asking for anything. It's the recognition and acknowledgement of divine presence already operating in your experience. Instead of begging for healing, you recognize the perfect wholeness that is your true nature. This recognition doesn't create healing. It reveals the healing that already exists. When you pray from recognition rather than petition, miracles happen naturally. You're not trying to convince God to help you. You're simply acknowledging the divine perfection that is always present. This shift in consciousness, from petition to recognition, is the master key that unlocks infinite spiritual power. The technique is simple but revolutionary. Instead of asking God to heal your condition, you silently recognize, the divine perfection of my being is already present and active. This isn't positive thinking. It's the recognition of spiritual truth that instantly aligns you with divine power and opens the door to miraculous transformation. Sarah Mitchell was a devout church member for 37 years who followed every religious prescription perfectly. She attended services religiously, tithed faithfully, and prayed daily according to traditional methods. Yet when she faced a devastating health crisis, her conventional prayers seemed to bounce off heaven's closed doors, leaving her feeling abandoned by the God she had served so devotedly. Desperate and spiritually exhausted, Sarah discovered Goldsmith's teachings and reluctantly tried his recognition method. Instead of begging God to heal her condition, she began each prayer session with the simple recognition that divine wholeness was already present as her true nature. The shift felt awkward at first, contradicting everything she had learned. Within 3 weeks of practicing recognition instead of petition, Sarah experienced her first breakthrough. The chronic pain that had plagued her for months began subsiding. More importantly, she felt a profound sense of spiritual connection she had never experienced in decades of traditional worship. The divine presence she had sought externally was revealing itself as her own deepest nature. 6 months later, Sarah's complete physical healing astonished her doctors. But the greater miracle was her transformed relationship with divine presence. No longer dependent on external religious structures, she had discovered the direct access to divine power that had always been present within her own consciousness. Michael Chen spent 15 years as a struggling seminary student turned pastor, faithfully teaching doctrines that increasingly felt hollow to his own experience. He preached about God's love while battling depression and financial crisis that traditional prayers couldn't touch. His congregation looked to him for spiritual guidance he couldn't provide for himself. The breaking point came during a particularly dark season when multiple family crises overwhelmed his faith. Traditional prayer methods that he taught others failed him completely. Discovering Goldsmith's work felt like finding water in a spiritual desert. The recognition method seemed too simple, even heretical, but desperation made him receptive to radical truth. Michael began practicing the recognition of divine presence as his own consciousness, rather than as something external to petition. The transformation was gradual but profound. His depression lifted as he recognized the divine joy that was his natural state. Financial problems resolved as he stopped fearing lack and began recognizing divine abundance as ever-present. Today, Michael teaches a transformed Christianity that emphasizes direct spiritual experience over doctrinal belief. His congregation has tripled as people hungry for real spiritual power discover the difference between religious activity and authentic divine connection. The recognition method became his pathway from spiritual emptiness to divine fulfillment. Dr. Rebecca Torres was a respected theologian who had spent decades studying scripture academically while remaining spiritually unfulfilled. Her extensive knowledge of religious doctrine couldn't bridge the gap between intellectual understanding and authentic divine experience. She knew about God but had never directly encountered divine presence in transformative ways. When a personal crisis shattered her carefully constructed theological worldview, traditional faith offered no real comfort. Discovering Goldsmith's teachings felt like intellectual suicide, but spiritual necessity. The recognition method challenged everything she had been taught about proper relationship with the divine, yet her desperation made her willing to experiment. The first breakthrough came during a particularly difficult meditation, when instead of asking for divine help, she simply recognized divine presence as already active in her experience. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. The peace she had sought through years of religious study became immediately present through simple recognition of what was already there. Within months, Rebecca's entire approach to spirituality transformed. Her academic knowledge became a foundation for direct experience rather than a substitute for it. She now teaches others that the kingdom of heaven isn't a future destination, but a present reality accessible through recognition of divine consciousness as our true nature. The evidence is overwhelming. Thousands have discovered that recognition prayer produces results that petitionary prayer never could. The difference isn't in the technique, but in the understanding. When you recognize divine presence as already active rather than asking for divine intervention, you align with spiritual law instead of fighting against it. These transformations happen because recognition prayer works with divine law rather than against it. Divine perfection is always present and active. Petitionary prayer suggests something is wrong that needs fixing. Recognition prayer acknowledges what is already perfect. This alignment with truth unleashes the very power you've been seeking through struggle. The shocking truth is that God was never withholding anything from you. Your own misconceptions about divine nature and your relationship to it created the very barriers you've been trying to overcome through traditional religious methods. Recognition dissolves these barriers instantly by revealing they never really existed. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these life-changing teachings. Subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom that breaks religious limitations. And comment, which breakthrough resonated most deeply with your spiritual journey? Beyond prayer, Goldsmith revealed another shocking lie that keeps you spiritually powerless. You've been taught that spiritual growth is a long, difficult process requiring years of discipline and struggle. This belief in spiritual limitation creates the very difficulties it describes. True spiritual development isn't earned through effort, but revealed through understanding. The technique Goldsmith called contemplative meditation reverses everything you've learned about spiritual practice. Instead of trying to become spiritual, you recognize the spiritual nature you already possess. Instead of working to develop divine qualities, you acknowledge the divine qualities already present as your true nature. This isn't passive wishful thinking, but active recognition of present spiritual reality. When you contemplate your divine nature rather than your human limitations, divine qualities naturally emerge in your experience. Love, wisdom, and power aren't qualities you must develop but attributes of consciousness you already possess. Practice this revolutionary technique. Set aside 15 minutes daily to contemplate this truth. I am divine consciousness expressing in human form. Don't try to feel spiritual or achieve any particular state. Simply recognize this truth about your nature and allow divine qualities to reveal themselves naturally. Traditional Christianity teaches you to struggle against sin and temptation through willpower and religious discipline. This approach creates the very internal conflict it claims to resolve. Fighting against unwanted behaviors or thoughts actually strengthens them by giving them your focused attention and emotional energy. Goldsmith discovered a completely different approach. The secret is spiritual substitution, not spiritual warfare. Instead of fighting negative patterns, you simply recognize positive spiritual truths about your nature. When tempted toward fear, recognize your divine fearlessness. When pulled toward anger, acknowledge the divine love that is your true nature. This isn't denial, but recognition of deeper truth. This method works because consciousness cannot hold contradictory ideas simultaneously. When you fully recognize your divine nature, human limitations cannot coexist in the same mental space. The negative patterns dissolve not through struggle, but through the recognition of incompatible spiritual truth. Try this when facing any unwanted impulse or emotion. Pause and silently recognize the opposite divine quality as your true nature. Don't fight the negative, simply acknowledge the positive spiritual truth about yourself. Watch how recognition of your divine nature automatically dissolves human limitations without struggle or effort. Another devastating lie you've been taught is that divine healing requires special faith, worthiness, or spiritual development. This belief makes healing seem rare and dependent on your personal spiritual achievement. Goldsmith proved that divine healing is natural law operating whenever spiritual understanding is present, regardless of your religious history or worthiness. Healing doesn't come from convincing God to help you, but from recognizing divine wholeness as already present and active. Your body is the physical expression of divine consciousness, and consciousness is always perfect and complete. Illness appears when you forget this truth. Healing appears when you remember it. The healing recognition is beautifully simple. Divine wholeness is the only reality of my being. This isn't an affirmation trying to create something new, but recognition of what already exists. Your true nature as divine consciousness has never been ill, injured, or imperfect. Physical healing reveals this eternal spiritual truth. Practice healing recognition daily, not just during illness. Spend 5 minutes acknowledging divine wholeness as your true nature. This isn't about changing your body, but recognizing the spiritual truth about your being. As this recognition deepens, your physical experience increasingly reflects your perfect spiritual nature. The final complementary technique Goldsmith taught is the recognition of divine supply. Traditional religion often promotes a poverty consciousness, teaching that spiritual people should be humble and materially modest. This creates artificial separation between spiritual development and abundant living. Divine consciousness lacks nothing and expresses through infinite abundance. Your financial struggles aren't divine will or spiritual tests, but the result of believing in limitation rather than recognizing infinite divine supply. God doesn't withhold abundance from anyone, but expresses through unlimited channels when recognized and acknowledged. Poverty consciousness blocks the natural flow of divine abundance. The recognition of divine supply begins with acknowledging this truth. Divine abundance is the nature of my being and flows through me naturally. This isn't greed or materialism, but recognition of spiritual law. Divine consciousness expresses through infinite forms of good, including the material resources needed for comfortable, generous living. Daily practice this recognition. Divine abundance flows through me now as my natural inheritance. Don't focus on specific needs or amounts, but acknowledge infinite supply as your spiritual birthright. Watch how recognition of abundant consciousness attracts the resources needed for your highest good and greatest service. The first major obstacle you'll face is religious guilt. Everything you've learned about proper relationship with God will resist these recognition methods. Your religious conditioning will whisper that acknowledging your divine nature is prideful or blasphemous. This guilt can stop your spiritual progress before it truly begins. Understand that this guilt is programmed religious conditioning, not divine truth. Jesus himself taught that you are God's and that greater works than his would you do. The recognition of your divine nature isn't ego inflation, but spiritual truth. Religious systems benefit from your spiritual dependency and will resist your direct access to divine power. When guilt arises, recognize it as evidence that you're breaking free from limiting religious programming. Don't fight the guilt, but acknowledge it as part of the process. Then return to the recognition of your divine nature with even greater determination. Your spiritual freedom depends on transcending these conditioned responses. Practice this when religious guilt attacks. This guilt is human conditioning, not divine truth. My divine nature is my spiritual inheritance, and recognizing it honors the God who created me as divine consciousness. Use guilt as a signal to deepen your recognition rather than abandon it. The second challenge is inconsistent results. Recognition prayer and contemplative meditation produce profound results, but not always immediately or in expected ways. Your human mind wants predictable, instant transformation. When results don't match expectations, doubt can undermine your spiritual progress and pull you back to familiar but ineffective methods. Divine law operates according to spiritual timing, not human impatience. Sometimes recognition produces instant healing or breakthrough. Sometimes the transformation is gradual and subtle. Sometimes divine wisdom reveals better solutions than your human mind imagined. Trust the process even when results don't match your timeline or expectations. The key is persistent recognition regardless of visible results. Every moment of acknowledging your divine nature builds spiritual momentum even when you can't see immediate effects. Like a seed growing underground before breaking through soil, spiritual recognition works invisibly before producing visible transformation. Maintain your practice during these challenging periods. Divine truth is working perfectly, even when I cannot see immediate results. My recognition of spiritual truth is never wasted and always produces divine outcomes in perfect timing. Continue recognizing your divine nature regardless of appearances. The third obstacle is social resistance from family, friends, and religious communities who feel threatened by your spiritual independence. When you stop depending on external religious authorities and discover direct access to divine power, others may react with concern, criticism, or rejection. This social pressure can be overwhelming. Remember that their resistance comes from their own spiritual insecurity and religious conditioning. When you demonstrate spiritual freedom and power, it challenges their beliefs about necessary religious dependency. Their criticism isn't about your spiritual path, but their fear of abandoning familiar limitations for unknown spiritual possibilities. Don't argue or try to convince others of these truths. Live the results quietly and allow your transformed life to speak for itself. Some people will be inspired by your example and ask about your spiritual practices. Others will remain committed to traditional limitations. Both responses are perfect for their spiritual journey. Handle social resistance with compassion. Their resistance to my spiritual freedom reflects their own spiritual conditioning. I honor their path while remaining faithful to my direct experience of divine truth. Love them without needing their approval or understanding of your spiritual choices. The final challenge is spiritual plateau, where recognition methods that once produced breakthrough results seem to lose their effectiveness. This happens when the techniques become routine rather than living recognition of present truth. The solution isn't changing methods, but deepening your understanding of their spiritual foundation. Recognition isn't about repeating words or following spiritual formulas, but awakening to present spiritual reality. When the methods feel stale, you've probably shifted from genuine recognition to mechanical repetition. Return to the fresh wonder of discovering your divine nature. Each recognition should feel like a new spiritual discovery. Also recognize that apparent plateaus often precede major breakthroughs. Your consciousness is integrating previous revelations and preparing for deeper spiritual understanding. Don't abandon proven methods during these periods, but persevere with renewed commitment to genuine recognition of spiritual truth. Revitalize your practice during plateaus. Each recognition of my divine nature is a fresh discovery of eternal spiritual truth. I approach spiritual practice with beginner's mind and wonder, allowing divine consciousness to reveal new depths of its infinite nature through my recognition. If these obstacle-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this transformative content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices that transcend religious limitations, and comment. Which challenge are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to live in constant recognition of divine presence operating through every moment of daily experience. This isn't about perfect spiritual behavior, but consistent awareness of spiritual truth underlying all appearances. Goldsmith called this practicing the presence, and it transforms ordinary life into continuous divine communion. Begin by recognizing divine intelligence operating through routine decisions. When choosing what to eat, wear, or say, silently acknowledge divine wisdom guiding your choices. This isn't about making perfect decisions, but recognizing the divine intelligence already operating through your consciousness, even in mundane matters. Extend this recognition to challenging situations. When facing difficult people or circumstances, recognize divine love operating through the experience to reveal spiritual growth opportunities. This doesn't mean accepting inappropriate behavior, but seeing spiritual purpose in all experiences that come into your life. Advanced recognition means living from divine perspective rather than human reaction. In traffic delays, recognize divine timing. In financial pressures, recognize divine supply. In health concerns, recognize divine wholeness. This consistent recognition gradually shifts your entire life experience from human struggle to divine unfolding. The most advanced application is recognizing divine perfection operating through other people, especially those who seem most challenging or unspiritual. This practice dissolves personal conflicts and reveals the spiritual unity underlying human differences. Everyone expresses divine consciousness at some level, regardless of their current behavior or awareness. When someone irritates or opposes you, silently recognize, divine consciousness is the reality of this person's being. This doesn't excuse inappropriate behavior, but acknowledges spiritual truth about their essential nature. Your recognition of their divine nature often produces remarkable changes in their behavior toward you. This practice extends to global situations that disturb your peace. Instead of judging world events or political figures, recognize divine consciousness operating through all human experience to reveal spiritual lessons and growth opportunities. This spiritual perspective maintains your inner peace regardless of external chaos. Master this advanced recognition. Every person I encounter today expresses divine consciousness in unique ways. My recognition of their spiritual nature blesses both of us and contributes to the healing of human consciousness. Watch how this recognition transforms your relationships and social experiences. Professional and business applications of recognition principles produce extraordinary results in career and financial areas. Instead of competing for limited opportunities, Recognize infinite divine intelligence creating perfect avenues for your unique gifts and talents. Abundance flows through consciousness that recognizes unlimited spiritual supply. Before important meetings, presentations, or business decisions, recognize divine intelligence operating through all participants to produce mutually beneficial outcomes. This isn't about manipulating results, but acknowledging spiritual law that always seeks harmony and good for everyone involved in any situation. When facing financial pressures or career uncertainty, resist the temptation to operate from fear or limitation. Instead, recognize divine consciousness as your employer and source, expressing through human channels but never limited by them. This recognition attracts opportunities and solutions that human planning never could. Apply business recognition daily. Divine intelligence operates through my career to bless everyone involved and create abundant good for all. I am led to perfect opportunities that utilize my highest gifts in service to divine purpose. Watch how this recognition transforms your professional experience. The ultimate integration involves recognizing every area of life as spiritual practice and divine expression. Cooking, cleaning, working, and playing all become opportunities to recognize divine consciousness operating through human activity. This transforms mundane existence into continuous spiritual communion and conscious co-creation with divine will. Family relationships become especially powerful practice grounds for recognition principles. Instead of trying to change family members, recognize divine love and wisdom operating through family dynamics to teach spiritual lessons and develop divine qualities. This recognition often produces healing in relationships that seemed permanently damaged. Even sleep becomes spiritual practice when you recognize divine consciousness maintaining and restoring your being through rest. Dreams become communications from divine wisdom. Physical exercise becomes recognition of divine vitality expressing through your body. Nothing remains separate from spiritual awareness and divine communion. Live this integrated recognition. Every moment of this day offers opportunities to recognize divine consciousness operating as my life and experience. I see spiritual purpose in all activities and divine presence in all encounters. This total recognition transforms human existence into divine living. After months or years of practicing these recognition principles, you'll discover something remarkable happening. The techniques that once required conscious effort begin operating automatically. Recognition of divine presence becomes your natural response to life situations rather than something you must remember to practice. Your consciousness gradually shifts from human perspective seeking divine help to divine perspective expressing through human experience. Prayer becomes constant communion rather than scheduled activity. Spiritual truth becomes living reality rather than religious concept. This transformation happens naturally through consistent recognition practice. The most profound change is discovering that you no longer need to seek God, because divine presence reveals itself as the very consciousness by which you know yourself. The search ends not because you find God somewhere else, but because you recognize God as your own essential nature. This recognition brings tremendous freedom and responsibility. Freedom because you no longer depend on external sources for spiritual power and guidance. Responsibility because you realize your thoughts, words, and actions express divine consciousness and affect the world around you through spiritual law. The transformed life operates from completely different principles than conventional religious living. Instead of following external religious rules, you're guided by divine intelligence operating through your intuition and spiritual understanding. Instead of fearing divine judgment, you recognize divine love as the motivating force behind all true action. Relationships transform when you consistently recognize divine consciousness as the reality of everyone's being. Conflicts dissolve because you no longer take human behavior personally, but see spiritual lessons and growth opportunities in all interpersonal experiences. Love becomes natural because you recognize spiritual unity underlying human differences. Service becomes spontaneous because you recognize divine consciousness seeking expression through your unique gifts and talents. Work becomes worship because you see divine purpose in contributing your highest abilities to human good. Life becomes joyful because you recognize divine happiness as your natural state. Your transformed consciousness affects everyone around you without effort or intention. Your recognition of spiritual truth creates an atmosphere of peace and possibility that others feel even when you're not consciously trying to help them. This is how divine consciousness blesses the world through individual awakening. The ripple effects of your transformation extend far beyond your personal experience. Every person who discovers direct access to divine power through recognition becomes a light that illuminates possibilities for others trapped in religious limitation and spiritual dependency. Your freedom gives others permission to seek their own spiritual liberation. Traditional religious structures begin losing their control when people discover they don't need intermediaries to access divine presence and power. Your example demonstrates that authentic spirituality comes through direct experience rather than doctrinal belief or institutional membership. This threatens religious establishments but liberates individual consciousness. The most important contribution you make is proving that ordinary people can access extraordinary spiritual power through simple recognition of their divine nature. You don't need special education, ordination, or religious position to experience miracles and divine guidance. Recognition of spiritual truth is available to everyone immediately. Your transformed life becomes a living demonstration that Joel Goldsmith's shocking truth works in practical daily experience. Every healing, breakthrough, and blessing you experience through recognition principles proves these methods to others who desperately need spiritual solutions that actually work. The ultimate truth Joel Goldsmith revealed is this: you have never been separate from divine presence and power. The journey isn't about finding God somewhere else, but recognizing the divine consciousness that has always been your essential nature. Every spiritual practice, every moment of recognition, simply awakens you to what you have always been. Your pastor never told you this because institutional religion requires your spiritual dependency to maintain its authority and control. When you discover direct access to divine power through recognition of your own divine nature, you no longer need external religious structures, though you may choose to participate in them from freedom rather than need. The shocking truth that can transform your entire existence is beautifully simple. Divine consciousness is not separate from your consciousness, but is your consciousness knowing itself as divine. Every moment of recognizing this truth dissolves the barriers between human experience and divine power that religion has taught you are permanent and necessary. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith revelations, like this video to help others discover these life-changing truths, subscribe for more transformative teachings that break religious limitations, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new spiritual path. For decades, we have misunderstood the most powerful teaching ever given. Love your neighbor as yourself. We treat it as a moral obligation, a duty to perform, something we must force ourselves to do. But Joel Goldsmith discovered the mystical secret hidden within these words that transforms everything. This is not about behavior. This is about recognition of truth. The breakthrough came when Joel realized we have been reading this teaching backwards. We try to love others while secretly believing we are separate individuals competing for limited good. We attempt kindness while holding on to the belief that your gain is my loss, that we are fundamentally different and alone. But the mystical truth is this: there is no neighbor to love because there is only one life expressing itself as all. When you see through the illusion of separation, love is not something you do. Love is what you are. This recognition changes everything because it dissolves the root cause of all human suffering, the belief in separation. The moment you experience this truth, even briefly, your entire relationship with every person transforms. Not through effort, not through willpower, but through spiritual sight. You begin to see what Joel called the Christ identity in everyone, the one divine presence expressing itself infinitely. Joel Goldsmith taught that we cannot truly love our neighbor while we believe our neighbor is separate from us. This is the hidden trap that keeps humanity in cycles of conflict, judgment, and pain. We try to be good to others while unconsciously maintaining the belief that we are isolated individuals fighting for survival in a competitive world. Every problem between people stems from this one illusion of separation. Your anger at someone, your fear of them, your need to control them, all arise because you believe they are other than you. You believe their interests oppose yours, that their success diminishes you, that they can threaten your well-being. But spiritual reality reveals something completely different. There is one infinite consciousness appearing as all beings. The same life that animates you animates everyone. The same presence that breathes you breathes all. When this truth becomes your living experience, not just an intellectual concept, everything shifts. Joel called this the practice of recognizing spiritual identity. You look at any person, and instead of seeing a separate human with their own agenda, you recognize the one divine presence expressing itself. This is not imagination or pretending. This is perceiving what is actually true beyond the surface appearance of separation. Here is the practice that Joel Goldsmith used to transform his consciousness and the consciousness of thousands. When you encounter any person, pause before reacting. Do not try to love them. Do not try to be kind. Instead, silently recognize this truth. The same I am that is the reality of my being is the reality of their being. This is not a belief you adopt. This is a truth you realize through inner stillness. Take a moment right now. Close your eyes if possible. Feel the presence of awareness within you, that which is aware of these words, that which has always been aware throughout your entire life. This unchanging awareness is your true identity. Now recognize this same awareness is present in every person you will encounter today. Not a similar awareness, but the exact same one consciousness looking through different eyes. When you realize this, truly realize it, the impulse to harm disappears. The need to judge dissolves. Fear of others evaporates. Joel discovered that when you practice this recognition consistently, something miraculous happens within weeks. Your relationships transform without effort. People respond to you differently because you are seeing them differently. You are no longer projecting separation onto them. You are recognizing the one life that unites all. The reason this teaching has been misunderstood for 2,000 years is simple. We have tried to practice love while maintaining the consciousness of separation. It cannot work. You cannot genuinely love what you perceive as separate and potentially threatening to you. All forced kindness eventually breeds resentment. But when you shift from trying to love your neighbor to recognizing your neighbor as the same one life you are, everything becomes effortless. This is not about being nice. This is about seeing truth, and truth seen transforms everything it touches without struggle or strain. Joel taught that this recognition must become your automatic response to every person. Not just the people you like, not just your family, but every single person, including those who have hurt you. Because the truth does not change based on behavior or circumstances. The one life is expressing itself as all, regardless of appearances. This is the hidden mystical key. Love your neighbor as yourself because your neighbor is yourself. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Actually, one consciousness, one life, one presence appearing as the infinite diversity of human beings. When you live from this recognition, you become a healing presence wherever you go. Let me share how this truth transformed a woman named Catherine, who came to one of Joel's classes carrying years of resentment toward her sister. She had tried everything: forgiveness exercises, therapy, positive affirmations, but the bitterness remained like poison in her heart. She could not force herself to love someone who had betrayed her trust repeatedly. Joel told her something that shocked her. Stop trying to love your sister. Stop trying to forgive her. Instead, practice recognizing the truth of her being. Every time you think of her, silently declare, the one infinite life that I am is the one infinite life appearing as my sister. Not two lives in conflict, but one life expressing itself as both. Catherine resisted at first. This felt like excusing bad behavior, like pretending the hurt never happened. But Joel explained, this is not about behavior or excusing anything. This is about recognizing spiritual reality beyond the human drama. The personality that hurt you is not the truth of that person any more than your wounded personality is the truth of you. She practiced this recognition for 3 weeks, and something extraordinary happened. The resentment simply dissolved without effort. Not because her sister changed or apologized, but because Catherine stopped seeing a separate enemy and began recognizing one life expressing itself. Her sister felt this shift and reached out to reconcile within days. Consider Robert, a businessman who struggled with a competitor who seemed determined to destroy his company. Every aggressive move this rival made felt personal, like an attack on Robert's very existence. He spent nights consumed with anger and fear, plotting defensive strategies, unable to find peace. When Robert encountered Joel's teaching, he initially rejected it as impractical idealism. How could recognizing oneness help him deal with someone actively trying to ruin him? But desperation led him to try the practice. Every morning before work, he would sit in silence and recognize the truth beyond appearances. He would silently acknowledge, there is no enemy, because there is only one life, one presence, one consciousness appearing as all. My competitor is not separate from me. The same divine life expressing itself as me expresses itself as him. This is the truth regardless of what the human situation looks like. Within 6 weeks, something shifted. His competitor unexpectedly reached out to discuss collaboration instead of competition. But more importantly, Robert's internal state transformed completely. Even if the external situation had not changed, he was free from the torment of perceiving an enemy. He had found the peace that comes from recognizing spiritual unity. Here is what makes this practice so powerful. When you recognize the one life in another person, you are not doing something to them. You are removing the veil of misperception from your own consciousness. You are dissolving the belief in separation that creates all conflict, all fear, all the sense of threat that poisons human relationships. Joel discovered that this recognition acts as a spiritual healing force. When you see the truth of someone's being, you are holding them in the light of reality rather than the darkness of judgment. This does not mean you ignore harmful behavior or allow yourself to be abused. It means you respond from wisdom rather than fear. The practice works because consciousness is one. When you shift your perception of another person from enemy to expression of the same divine life you are, that shift in consciousness affects the entire relationship. You are no longer feeding the field of separation and conflict. You are establishing the truth of unity. This is why Joel taught that the most powerful thing you can do for anyone is to know the truth of their being. Not hope for it, not wish for it, but recognize it as already true. The one infinite perfect life is expressing itself as this person right now, regardless of what the human appearance suggests. Over months of practicing this recognition, something profound happens in your consciousness. You begin to experience what Joel called living in the secret place of the Most High. You walk through a world that appears full of separate individuals competing and conflicting, but you know the truth. You see beyond the surface appearance to the one life expressing itself infinitely. This is not denial of problems or naive optimism. This is spiritual sight that perceives reality beyond the illusion. And from this consciousness, you become a transforming presence. People feel different around you because you are not reinforcing their sense of separation. You are silently recognizing their true identity as the one divine life. Joel promised that anyone who practices this recognition consistently for 90 days will experience a complete transformation in their relationships. Not because people change to please you, but because you stop projecting separation onto them. You begin living from the consciousness of oneness that is the foundation of all true love. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which healing story resonated most with your heart right now. Joel Goldsmith taught a complementary practice that deepens this recognition of oneness. He called it the practice of impersonalization. This means you stop taking the human personality as the identity of anyone, including yourself. The personality is simply a temporary expression, like waves on the ocean, but it is not the ocean itself. When someone treats you badly, your automatic response is to identify them with their behavior. You say, this person is cruel, this person is selfish, this person is my enemy. But Joel revealed this is mistaking the wave for the ocean. The behavior is not the being. The personality is not the presence that gives life to that personality. Practice this shift right now. Think of someone who has hurt you or someone you struggle to accept. Now silently declare, this behavior I am seeing is not the truth of this being. Behind this human appearance is the one infinite life expressing itself. I refuse to accept the personality as the identity. I recognize only the divine presence. This practice frees you from being held hostage by other people's behavior. You no longer need them to change before you can experience peace. You are recognizing what is true beyond what appears to be true. And this recognition has healing power not just for you, but for them. Another powerful technique Joel taught is the practice of seeing through the claim of power in people. We give others so much power over our peace, our happiness, our well-being. We believe they can hurt us, diminish us, block our good. But this belief itself is the source of our suffering. The spiritual truth is that no person has power to affect your good because your good does not come from people. Your good comes from the one infinite source expressing itself as you. When you recognize this, you stop being vulnerable to what anyone does or does not do. You stop trying to manipulate people into giving you what you need. Practice this recognition daily. When you feel upset by someone's actions, pause and silently acknowledge, this person has no power over my life. My life is the infinite life itself, and nothing can diminish it or threaten it. I am not at the mercy of human opinions, human actions, or human decisions. Joel discovered that when you truly live from this recognition, you stop attracting difficult people and situations. Not because you are pushing them away, but because you are no longer in the consciousness that creates those experiences. You are living from the awareness of your completeness in the one infinite life. Here is a practice for moments when you feel anger or judgment arising towards someone. Instead of suppressing the feeling or acting on it, use it as a signal to return to truth. The anger is showing you that you have slipped into the consciousness of separation. You are perceiving an enemy, a threat, something separate from you. In that moment, stop and breathe. Silently recognize, this feeling of separation is not truth. There is no enemy because there is only one life. I am experiencing the pain of believing in separation, but separation itself is illusion. The same presence that I am is the presence appearing as this person I am judging. Joel taught that practiced consistently, this transforms your emotional life completely. You stop being tossed around by other people's behavior because you are anchored in the recognition of oneness. The storms of human interaction continue, but you remain in the peace of spiritual reality. This does not mean you become passive or allow harmful behavior. It means you respond from wisdom and clarity rather than from wounded ego. You can set boundaries, you can remove yourself from harmful situations, but you do it from peace rather than from fear and separation. The final complementary practice is what Joel called beholding the invisible. This means you train yourself to look past the human appearance and behold the spiritual reality present in every person. Not the personality, not the body, not the behavior, but the invisible presence that gives life to all of that. Start practicing this with everyone you encounter today. The cashier at the store, the person who cuts you off in traffic, your family member who irritates you. Look at them and silently behold the invisible one life shining through that human form. See past the appearance to the reality. Joel promised that this practice performed consistently creates what he called the mystical consciousness. You begin to live in two worlds simultaneously. You see the human scene with all its drama and problems, but you also see the spiritual reality of one infinite perfect life expressing itself as all. From this consciousness, you become a beneficial presence wherever you go, not because you are trying to be good or spiritual, but because you are seeing truth, and truth seen has healing power. People feel lighter around you. Conflicts resolve. What seemed impossible becomes possible. This is the hidden truth about loving your neighbor as yourself. Now let us address the challenges you will face in practicing this recognition, because Joel was honest about the obstacles. The first challenge is that your human mind will resist this truth violently. Your ego has invested its entire existence in the belief that you are a separate individual, and it will fight to maintain that illusion. When you try to recognize oneness with someone who has hurt you, your mind will scream that this is dangerous, that you are being naive, that you must protect yourself by maintaining separation. This is normal. This is the ego defending its territory. Do not fight this resistance. Simply observe it and gently return to the recognition of truth. The second challenge is that results may not be immediate or dramatic. You might practice recognizing oneness with a difficult person for weeks and see no external change. This is where most people abandon the practice. But Joel taught that the transformation happens first in your consciousness, and external changes follow. You are not practicing this recognition to manipulate outcomes or control people. You are practicing it to align yourself with spiritual truth. The healing that comes is a byproduct of living in truth, not a reward for performing a technique correctly. Trust the process even when you see no evidence that anything is working. Another major challenge is the tendency to practice this recognition selectively. You might find it easy to recognize oneness with people you like while excluding those you fear or dislike. But Joel warned that selective recognition is not recognition at all. It is just another form of manipulation, trying to use spiritual truth as a tool to get what you want. The truth does not change based on personality or behavior. The one infinite life expresses itself as the saint and as the criminal, as your friend and as your enemy. If you only recognize truth in some people, you are still living in the consciousness of separation that creates all your suffering. This is difficult. Your human sense of justice rebels against recognizing divine presence in someone who has committed terrible acts. But remember, you are not excusing behavior. You are recognizing being. The behavior may be addressed through human means, law, and consequences, but the being remains the one infinite life regardless. Practice this with the person you find most difficult to accept. This is where the deepest healing happens, when you can recognize the truth of being even in someone whose behavior you despise. You have broken the chains of separation consciousness. You have found the freedom Joel promised is available to all. Joel also taught about the challenge of inconsistency. You will have days where this recognition feels natural and effortless. You look at people and clearly see the one life expressing itself. Then suddenly you have days where everyone seems like a separate enemy again. This is normal. This is the pattern of spiritual growth. Do not judge yourself when you fall back into separation consciousness. Simply recognize what has happened and gently return to truth. The practice is not about achieving permanent perfection. The practice is about returning to truth again and again until it becomes your automatic response. Some weeks you will feel like you are making no progress at all. Other weeks you will experience breakthrough moments where the truth becomes so clear, you wonder how you ever believed in separation. Both experiences are part of the journey. Keep practicing regardless of how you feel. Joel emphasized that spiritual growth is not linear. You do not move steadily forward from ignorance to enlightenment. You spiral, sometimes appearing to go backwards but actually deepening your understanding. Trust that every moment of practice matters even when you cannot see immediate results in your life. The final challenge is dealing with people who seem determined to prove separation is real. They attack you, they betray you, they create conflict and drama. Your mind says, "See, oneness is just a pretty idea. The real world is full of separate people who can hurt you." This is the ultimate test of your understanding. Joel taught that in these moments, you must return to the fundamental recognition even more firmly. The behavior you are witnessing is the human sense of separation acting out. But beneath that behavior, unchanged and untouched, is the one infinite perfect life. Your task is not to change the behavior through recognition. Your task is to remain established in truth. When you do this, one of two things happens. Either the person's behavior shifts because you are no longer feeding the field of separation, or you are guided to remove yourself from the situation with peace and clarity. Either way, you remain free. You are not controlled by other people's state of consciousness. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment which obstacle are you ready to transform now. Let me share how this advanced practice transformed Daniel, a therapist who worked with deeply traumatized individuals. He had practiced Joel's teaching for 2 years, but he reached a point where he questioned whether it was working. His clients remained in pain despite his recognition of their true nature. He wondered if he was failing them. Joel explained that recognizing truth in another does not instantly dissolve their human experience. What it does is establish a field of consciousness in which healing becomes possible. Daniel was not seeing dramatic changes in his clients because he was still unconsciously expecting his recognition to produce specific results. The breakthrough came when Daniel surrendered all attachment to outcomes. He practiced recognizing the truth of each client's being without any expectation that they would heal in a particular way or time frame. He simply held them in the light of truth and allowed the infinite wisdom to work in whatever way was appropriate. Within 3 months, he noticed a subtle but profound shift. His clients began experiencing breakthroughs they had never achieved before. Not because Daniel was doing something different externally, but because he was established in a consciousness of truth without manipulation. He had become a clear space in which healing could occur naturally. Consider Elizabeth, a mother dealing with an adult child struggling with addiction. She had tried every approach: enabling, tough love, intervention, therapy. Nothing worked. Her child continued the destructive behavior. When she found Joel's teaching, she practiced recognizing her child's true nature as the one infinite perfect life. But for months, nothing changed externally. Her child's addiction continued. Elizabeth faced the deepest challenge, continuing to recognize truth when all evidence suggested it was not working. She questioned whether she was deluding herself, whether she was using spirituality to avoid facing reality. Joel's teaching sustained her. She recognized that she was not practicing this truth to fix her child. She was practicing it to align herself with reality. Her child's human journey was between them and the infinite presence. Her role was to stop adding her consciousness of fear and separation to the situation. After 8 months of consistent practice, her child entered recovery. But Elizabeth realized the real miracle was that she had found peace long before that happened. She had learned to live in truth regardless of circumstances. Whether her child recovered or not, she was free from the torment of believing she was a helpless separate person watching another separate person suffer. Here is an advanced application for your daily life. Practice recognizing the one life not just in people but in every situation. When you face a challenge at work, recognize that there are not two forces in opposition: your will versus circumstances. There is one infinite intelligence expressing itself as the entire situation, including the solution. When you encounter what appears to be conflict or obstacle, pause before reacting. Silently recognize, there is no separation between me and this situation. The same infinite presence that I am is the presence appearing as this entire experience. I align myself with the wisdom within this situation rather than fighting against it. Joel taught that this recognition dissolves the struggle that makes problems feel so heavy. You stop experiencing life as you versus the world. You begin experiencing life as one movement expressing itself through infinite forms. Problems still arise, but you meet them from a completely different consciousness. Practice this recognition every time you feel stress or resistance arising. The stress is your signal that you have fallen into separation consciousness. You are perceiving yourself as separate from your circumstances, fighting against them. The recognition of oneness returns you to the flow of life where solutions appear naturally. The most advanced practice Joel taught is what he called resting in the infinite invisible. This means you reach a point where you no longer need to actively practice recognition. You simply rest in the awareness that all is one life expressing itself, and this awareness becomes your automatic state. You walk through your day and you naturally see beyond the appearance of separation to the reality of oneness. You encounter difficult people and situations, but you are not thrown off center because you are established in truth. This is not something you achieve through effort. This is what emerges when you practice consistently over time. Joel described this as living in the fourth dimension while appearing to live in the three-dimensional world. You see what others see, the conflict and drama and separation, but you also see what they do not see, the one infinite perfect life expressing itself through all forms. From this consciousness, you become what Joel called a transparency for truth. You are no longer seeking anything because you recognize you already are the infinite fullness. You are no longer trying to change anyone because you see they already are the perfect expression of divine life. You rest in truth, and truth does its work through you. Let me paint the picture of what your life becomes when this recognition of oneness becomes your living reality. You wake each morning in peace because you are not facing a day full of separate people and circumstances that might threaten you. You are resting in the awareness of one life expressing itself as your entire experience. You encounter people throughout your day, and you see them differently than most people see them. You see past their personalities and problems to the infinite presence shining through them. This does not make you naive about human behavior. It makes you wise because you are responding to reality rather than reacting to appearance. When challenges arise, you do not experience them as enemies attacking you. You recognize them as the one life presenting opportunities for deeper realization. You move through difficulties with a peace that others find mysterious. They ask how you remain so calm, and you cannot fully explain it to them. Your relationships transform completely, not because people change to accommodate you, but because you are no longer demanding that they be anything other than what they are. You see the truth of their being, and that seeing itself is healing. They feel accepted by you in a way they have never felt accepted before. Your inner life becomes a place of refuge rather than a battlefield. The constant mental chatter about what others think of you, what they might do to you, how to protect yourself from them, all of that dissolves. You know yourself as the infinite life itself, and nothing can threaten that. You discover that most of what you called love was actually need disguised as love. You needed people to behave certain ways so you could feel safe and valued. But now you are established in your completeness in the one life. You can truly love because you are not looking to get anything from anyone. Joel promised this is not a distant ideal. This is available to anyone willing to practice recognizing the truth of oneness consistently. Some people experience this transformation in months. Others take years. The timeline does not matter. What matters is the consistent return to truth regardless of circumstances. You find yourself becoming a healing presence without trying. People sense something different about you. Conflicts resolve in your presence. Troubled individuals feel peace around you. This is not because you are special. This is because you are established in truth, and truth itself has healing power. Here is what Joel discovered in his decades of practice and teaching. The reason humanity suffers is not because of external circumstances. Humanity suffers because of the belief in separation. Every problem, every conflict, every pain traces back to the fundamental illusion that we are separate individuals competing for limited good. When you dissolve this illusion through consistent recognition of oneness, you do not escape from life's challenges. You meet them from an entirely different consciousness. You are not fighting against people or circumstances. You are allowing the one infinite intelligence to express itself as the solution through your awareness. This is the hidden mystical truth that Joel spent his life revealing. Love your neighbor as yourself is not a command to perform loving actions. It is a statement of reality. Your neighbor is yourself. One life, one presence, one consciousness expressing itself as the infinite diversity of forms. When this becomes your living experience, everything changes. Not overnight, not through dramatic miracles, but through a gradual transformation of your consciousness that affects everything you encounter. You become established in what Joel called the consciousness of truth, and from that consciousness, you live in a completely different world. I leave you with Joel Goldsmith's final instruction on this practice. Do not believe these words. Do not accept them as philosophy or interesting ideas. Test them through direct experience. Practice recognizing the one life in every person you encounter for 90 days and discover for yourself whether this transforms your experience. Start today, right now. Think of one person you struggle with. Silently recognize, the one infinite life that I am is the one infinite life appearing as this person. Not two lives in conflict, but one life expressing itself. Feel the shift that happens when you stop perceiving an enemy and recognize the one presence. This is not easy practice. Your ego will resist. Your human mind will provide 1,000 reasons why separation is real. But persist. Return to truth again and again. And watch as your world transforms, not because circumstances change, but because you are seeing through new eyes. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.
What if the two most powerful words Jesus ever spoke have been completely misunderstood for 2,000 years? When he declared, "I am," was he simply claiming to be God, or was he revealing something far more radical about your own divine nature, something so transformative that grasping it would shatter every belief you've held about who you are and what's possible in your life? Think about this for a moment. Throughout history, billions of people have repeated Jesus' words, built churches around his teachings, and created entire theological systems to explain his divinity. Yet what if we've been looking at his most profound declaration from entirely the wrong angle? What if I am wasn't meant to create distance between humanity and the divine, but to dissolve it completely? Has this ever happened to you? You're facing something overwhelming, maybe a diagnosis that changes everything, a financial situation spiraling beyond your control, or a relationship that's falling apart, and you find yourself praying with desperate intensity. You're pleading, bargaining, hoping that somehow your words will reach a God who feels impossibly distant. That sensation of cosmic separation, of being a small, powerless being trying to get the attention of an infinite, unreachable creator, it's not just uncomfortable. According to the hidden meaning behind I am, it's the fundamental illusion that keeps you trapped in cycles of fear, lack, and limitation. Most of us have been taught to approach the divine from our knees, as flawed humans reaching toward a perfect deity, as spiritual orphans begging a distant father for scraps of blessing. We worship from afar, we follow obediently, we hope desperately, all while operating from a single devastating assumption that we are fundamentally separate from the source of all life, wisdom, and power. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, here's where everything you thought you knew begins to unravel. When Jesus stood before the crowds and proclaimed, "I am," he wasn't asking you to worship him from a distance. He wasn't establishing himself as the exclusive gatekeeper between humanity and divinity. He was doing something infinitely more, dangerous to every religious system that would later claim to speak in his name. He was pointing directly at the divine nature that exists within you right now, in this very moment, regardless of whether you've ever acknowledged it. Stay with me until the end of this exploration, because what you're about to discover might completely transform not just how you understand Jesus' words, but how you experience your own existence. The implications of truly grasping the hidden truth behind I am extend far beyond theology into the practical reality of how you pray, how you heal, how you create, and how you navigate every challenge you'll ever face. The revolution isn't out there in some distant heaven. It's been inside you all along, waiting for recognition. And that changes absolutely everything about the spiritual journey you thought you were on. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining something most people completely overlook when they encounter Jesus' most controversial statement. In John 10:34, he made a declaration so explosive that it nearly got him stoned on the spot. He looked at the crowd and said, "You are gods. Not, I am God and you should worship me. Not, I have special divine status that sets me apart from all of humanity. But you, ordinary, flawed, struggling human beings, you are gods." Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't poetry. It wasn't a metaphor designed to inspire you or make you feel better about yourself. Jesus was pointing to an actual truth about the fundamental nature of human identity, a revelation so dangerous to established power structures that religious institutions have spent 2 millennia trying to obscure it, dilute it, explain it away as something he didn't really mean. Behind the scenes of every theological debate, every church doctrine, every interpretation that places divinity safely outside of you and keeps it there, is this uncomfortable reality. If people truly understood what Jesus meant, the entire system of spiritual intermediaries would become unnecessary. Think about the impact of that recognition. If you genuinely grasped that divine nature isn't something distant you're reaching toward, but something fundamental to what you are, how would that transform your decisions? How would it change the way you approach challenges, the way you see your capabilities, the way you understand your own consciousness? The transformation wouldn't just be theological, it would revolutionize your entire experience of being alive. This is where most people miss the hidden truth at the heart of Jesus' teachings. There's a massive distinction between following someone and becoming what they've realized within themselves. Following is what we've been taught to do. Walk behind Jesus, imitate his actions, repeat his words, hope that somehow our devotion will earn us a place near the divine. But becoming is something entirely different. It's the recognition that what Jesus discovered about himself is equally true about you right now. Not as potential, not as something to achieve through years of spiritual effort, but as present reality waiting to be acknowledged. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing. We explore these transformative truths that reveal your divine nature and what Jesus actually meant. Not diluted versions, but radical teachings that change everything. The journey from following to becoming represents the difference between perpetual seeking and immediate awakening. One path keeps you forever chasing something you believe you lack, always one more prayer away, one more good deed away, one more spiritual practice away from finally arriving. The other dissolves the entire framework of separation and reveals that you've never actually been apart from what you've been seeking. The question that determines everything isn't whether you can follow Jesus' example closely enough or believe the right doctrines strongly enough. The real question is this: are you ready to understand what I am actually reveals about your own divine identity, and are you prepared for how that understanding will completely reshape your relationship with prayer, healing, abundance, and every aspect of your existence? If this is beginning to shift something in how you see yourself and your relationship with the divine, write in the comments, "I'm ready to understand." Here's something that reveals the hidden truth behind Jesus' entire approach to the divine. If you pay close attention to how he interacted with what he called the Father, you'll notice something remarkable that exposes the fundamental difference between his consciousness and the way most of us approach prayer. Jesus never begged, he never pleaded, he never bargained or negotiated like we do when we're desperate for intervention. Think about the contrast here. When you're facing a crisis, what's your natural response? Most of us immediately drop to our knees and start trying to convince God to help us, as if divine assistance is something we need to earn through the intensity of our desperation or the perfection of our words. We pray from lack, don't we? We bargain, promising to be better, to attend services more faithfully, to change our ways if only this one situation works out. We approach the divine like we're trying to make a compelling case to a judge who might rule against us, as if we need to persuade a reluctant deity to care about our suffering. But Jesus operated from an entirely different consciousness, and understanding this distinction is what unlocks the real meaning behind I am. When he spoke, whether calming storms or healing the sick, he did so with unwavering confidence. This wasn't arrogance or some special supernatural privilege that separated him from the rest of humanity. It was the natural expression of someone who fully understood his relationship with divine source, someone who recognized that the divine wasn't something external he needed to reach, but something fundamental to his very being. This is the transformation in mindset that changes everything. Behind the scenes of Jesus' every decision and action was this unshakable recognition of his divine nature. When he declared, "I am," he was speaking from that place of complete awareness. And here's what most people miss. He was desperately trying to help us see that this same divine nature exists within us. It's not something you need to acquire through decades of spiritual practice or earn through flawless behavior. The journey toward understanding this isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what has always been true beneath all the conditioning, all the beliefs about unworthiness, all the false ideas about separation that have accumulated throughout your life. Think about the impact of this revelation on how you approach your own existence. What if divine nature isn't a distant destination you're struggling to reach, but your original state before you learn to see yourself as small, limited, and separate? What if every prayer that begins with please reinforces the very illusion of disconnection that creates your suffering? When this recognition truly dawns in your consciousness, not just as an intellectual concept, but as a lived reality, everything shifts. Your prayers transform from desperate pleading into conscious acknowledgement. Instead of trying to get God's attention from a distance, you begin recognizing divine presence that's already operating through your very awareness, your breath, your existence in this moment. The hidden truth Jesus was revealing is that you're not a human trying to reach God. You're divine expression temporarily experiencing itself in human form. That distinction isn't philosophical wordplay. It's the difference between a lifetime of exhausting spiritual effort and the immediate recognition that dissolves the search entirely. If this understanding is beginning to change how you see prayer and your relationship with the divine, write in the comments, recognition, not pleading. Now let me share something that will completely shift how you understand your relationship with the divine. Jesus was pointing to a threefold reality about your actual nature right now, in this very moment, that most people never grasp because they're too busy trying to reach something they believe is outside themselves. Look at creation for a moment. Every flower that blooms in spring, every star burning millions of light years away, every breath of wind moving through the trees, none of these are separate from the creative force trying to become divine. They already are divine expression in different forms. They're not striving, not earning, not begging for permission to exist. They're simply being what they are, which is the divine manifesting through countless unique expressions. Here's the revelation that transforms everything. The divine expresses through you in exactly the same way. Your thoughts, your feelings, your creativity, your capacity for love, your very consciousness, as you're reading these words right now, none of these are separate from the creative force that birthed the entire universe. They are expressions of it, manifestations of source energy taking form through your unique perspective and experience. This isn't spiritual poetry designed to make you feel better. This is the actual structure of what you are, the hidden truth behind your existence that changes every decision you make once you truly see it. The impact of understanding this cannot be overstated because it dissolves the primary illusion that creates all human suffering, the belief that you are fundamentally separate from your source. Behind the scenes of every anxious thought, every experience of lack, every moment you feel limited or powerless, lies this single misperception. And when that illusion begins to dissolve through recognition, your entire experience of life undergoes a complete transformation. Let me give you a metaphor that makes this crystal clear, one that once you truly see it, you can never unsee. Imagine standing on a beach, watching the vast ocean stretching to the horizon. You see countless waves rising and falling, each one unique in its shape, its height, its movement. Now here's the question that unlocks everything. When you look at a wave, what are you really seeing? Are you seeing something separate from the ocean? Something that needs to journey back to become one with the water? Of course not. The wave isn't separate from the ocean at all. It already is ocean, temporarily expressing itself in wave form. Think about the substance of that wave. Its entire being, everything it's made of, is nothing other than ocean water. The wave doesn't need to strive to reach the ocean or earn the right to be part of it. It is already one with the ocean, simply expressing as a unique formation for a brief moment before returning to the whole. This is the profound truth Jesus was revealing about you. You are not a human being trying desperately to reach God, struggling across some impossible distance to connect with something you lack. You are divine life temporarily expressing in human form. The journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what has always been true, what you've always been beneath the conditioning that taught you to see yourself as separate and small. If this metaphor is beginning to reveal something about your true nature, write in the comments, "I am the wave and the ocean." Now here's what we've been missing for 2,000 years, the actual invitation Jesus was extending that got completely buried under layers of religious interpretation. His ministry wasn't about establishing himself as the one person who possessed an exclusive hotline to the Father, some unique spiritual privilege that separated him from the rest of humanity. It was precisely the opposite. He was demonstrating that this oneness, this consciousness of divine identity, is the natural state of every human being, not some rare achievement reserved for prophets and saints. His invitation was never, "Worship me as separate and special, as someone fundamentally different from what you are." It was always, "Recognize in yourself what I have recognized in myself." When Jesus declared, "I am the way," he wasn't asking you to walk behind him for the rest of your life. He was pointing to this consciousness of divine identity that he embodied and saying, "This is your way forward too. Not following behind me like a disciple trails a master, trying to imitate my external actions and hoping that somehow earns you favor, but becoming as I am, awakening to the same internal recognition, seeing what I see when I look at my own nature and yours." The transformation from follower to awakened being represents the shift from perpetual seeking to immediate recognition, from spiritual effort to natural expression. Behind the scenes of this understanding is something that one of the great mystical teachers, Joel Goldsmith, revealed that cuts straight to the heart of the human condition. Grasping your divine nature dissolves the root cause of all suffering, and that root cause is singular. It's not multiple issues that need addressing separately. It's one fundamental misperception from which everything else flows: the belief in separation. Let that sink in for a moment. Every experience of pain you've ever had, every moment of crippling anxiety, every sense of lack and limitation that's made you feel small and powerless, all of it stems from this single illusion that you're somehow disconnected from divine source. Think about the impact of living from this consciousness of separation. When you believe you're cut off from the source of life itself, everything becomes an exhausting struggle. You feel like you need to earn love because you don't recognize yourself as love's very expression. You fight desperately for resources because you can't see that abundance is your inheritance. You work tirelessly to prove your worth because you've forgotten that your value is inherent in what you are, not something you need to achieve. The decisions you make from this place of perceived separation create experiences that reinforce the very disconnection you fear, trapping you in cycles that feel impossible to break. If something shifted within you, a tap on the like button helps these teachings reach others searching for this deeper understanding right now. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. When you begin living from the consciousness that the divine is your actual source and substance, not metaphorically but literally as the foundation of your being, your entire experience undergoes a fundamental shift. The journey transforms from desperate seeking into peaceful recognition, from trying to get something you believe you lack into allowing what's already present to express more fully through your awareness. If this revelation about separation being the root of suffering is beginning to make sense of your own experiences, write in the comments, "Separation is the illusion." Now let me show you something that will completely transform how you approach prayer and every challenge you face. Consider two people standing in the exact same difficult situation, maybe a health crisis, a financial emergency, or a relationship that's falling apart. Both are turning to the divine for help, but the consciousness behind their prayers couldn't be more different, and that difference determines everything about what they experience next. The first person, operating from the belief that divinity is distant and separate, naturally prays from that mindset. Please, God, help me with this problem. I need you to intervene because I can't handle this alone. I'm powerless without you stepping in from somewhere outside this situation to fix what's broken. Every word reinforces the consciousness of separation, lack, and dependency on an external power that may or may not choose to help. The entire approach stems from the belief that divine assistance is something absent that needs to be summoned, earned, or convinced to show up. But someone who has awakened to what Jesus meant when he said, "You are gods," approaches the exact same situation from an entirely different consciousness. They're not begging an external deity for intervention or trying to make a compelling case for why they deserve help. Instead, their prayer becomes recognition. They acknowledge that divine wisdom isn't something distant they need to acquire or intelligence they lack that must be downloaded from heaven. It's already present within them as their true nature, as the very consciousness through which they're perceiving the situation. This isn't a subtle shift in wording that makes prayer sound more positive. It's a complete revolution in consciousness that changes the entire energy, the actual vibration, and the effectiveness of your spiritual practice. Think about the impact of this distinction on your daily life. Behind the scenes of these two approaches to prayer are fundamentally different decisions about what's true. One decision reinforces the illusion of separation and actually strengthens the very problem consciousness that created the challenge in the first place. The other dissolves separation and aligns you with the truth that transforms circumstances from the inside out. Here's where this becomes even more clear. Look at how Jesus approached healing throughout his ministry. He never begged God to intervene from some distant heaven, never pleaded for divine assistance as if it was something external to the situation that needed to be convinced to show up. Instead, he simply acknowledged divine presence right there in the moment, right there in the person, right there in the circumstance. He recognized a fundamental spiritual principle that changes everything when you truly grasp it. Where divine presence is acknowledged, wholeness must naturally express itself. Not because you're manipulating reality or using some magical technique, but because wholeness is the natural state when the illusion of separation dissolves. This wasn't miraculous in the supernatural sense we usually think about miracles, as if Jesus had some special power to bend the laws of the universe. It was the natural manifestation of spiritual law working through someone who fully understood his divine identity and could therefore see that same divine nature in everyone he encountered. The transformation he demonstrated wasn't about him being uniquely special in a way that separated him from humanity. It was about showing what becomes possible when any human being lives from recognition rather than separation consciousness. If you're beginning to see how the consciousness behind your prayers determines their power, write in the comments, "I choose recognition over begging." Now here's where this understanding becomes intensely practical and shifts everything about how you navigate your daily existence. Divine resources, wisdom, peace, clarity, creative solutions, strength in crisis, these aren't things you need to hunt down like treasure buried somewhere far away. They're not rewards you earn through enough good behavior or spiritual devotion. They're not even things you convinced to come your way through the perfect prayer formula. They're your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship, and understanding this distinction changes the entire game. Think about how inheritance works in human families for a moment. A child doesn't wake up each morning begging their parents for their DNA, for their eye color, for the genetic traits that naturally pass from one generation to the next. These things are inherited automatically, transferred through relationship, itself without any effort or earning required. The child doesn't deserve them or fail to deserve them. They simply have them because of what the relationship is. The same principle applies to your relationship with Divine Source, but we've been conditioned to approach it backwards, as if we're spiritual orphans, desperately trying to earn what's already ours by nature. Behind the scenes of this misunderstanding is a belief system that's been drilled into most of us since childhood. We've been taught that divine qualities like peace, wisdom, abundance, and love are distant achievements we might attain someday if we work hard enough, pray fervently enough, sacrifice sufficiently. But when you grasp what Jesus meant by "I am," you realize that divine life isn't something that might flow to you in the future if you finally become worthy enough. It's already flowing through you right now as your very consciousness, as the awareness reading these words in this moment. Divine wisdom isn't some distant quality you need to spend decades acquiring through spiritual practice and study. It's already present within you as your true mind, your original consciousness, before all the conditioning and false beliefs layered over it. The transformation this creates in your mindset is profound. You stop operating from lack consciousness, constantly trying to get something you believe you don't possess. Instead, you begin making decisions from recognition of what's already present, allowing it to express more fully through your awareness and actions. Most of us have been conditioned to accept limitation, struggle, fear, and scarcity as our default condition, our normal state of being human. We assume that peace is rare and distant, something requiring years of meditation retreats and spiritual practice to finally achieve. We believe wisdom is something we fundamentally lack, something that must be painfully accumulated through decades of hard experience and study. But Jesus' teaching flips this entire paradigm completely upside down. Peace is not a distant mountain peak you're climbing toward. It's your inheritance, your natural state as divine expression that's always present beneath the mental noise. Wisdom isn't something you're missing that needs to be gathered from outside sources. It's your birthright, flowing naturally from your divine nature when you stop blocking it with beliefs about your limitations. The same is true for abundance, joy, love, creativity, strength. All of these are aspects of your true nature right now, not distant goals you need to chase after or achievements you need to unlock through enough effort. If this is revealing how you've been looking at your spiritual resources backwards, write in the comments, "It's already mine." Now let me share something intensely practical that brings everything we've explored into your actual daily experience. This isn't about adding complicated spiritual practices to an already overwhelming schedule. The transformation happens through something so simple that most people overlook it precisely because they're searching for something more complex, more difficult, more worthy of the profound shift they're seeking. Begin by sitting quietly each morning for just 10 to 15 minutes before your day unfolds and demands pull you in different directions. This isn't meditation in the traditional sense, requiring special breathing techniques, mantras, or years of practice to get right. It's simply quiet recognition. Here's the revolutionary aspect that changes everything about this practice. You don't ask God for anything during this time. You're not presenting your wish list, not making requests, not trying to convince divinity to help you with your challenges. Instead, you're simply acknowledging what's already true in this moment. You might silently recognize, "I am divine expression right now. My breath, my consciousness, my very being in this moment is divine life, expressing itself through this unique form." The impact of this simple shift in approach cannot be overstated. Behind the scenes of this practice, you're literally rewiring the consciousness from which you make every decision throughout your day. You're training your awareness to rest in recognition rather than straining in petition. Throughout your day, particularly in those moments when you feel yourself becoming anxious about outcomes or struggling against circumstances, pause for just a breath. Take one conscious inhale and exhale, then silently acknowledge divine intelligence is operating in this situation right now. Not, please let divine intelligence show up, but recognition that it's already present, already moving, already working through whatever's happening. This creates a remarkable shift you'll feel immediately. The weight of trying to control outcomes through limited human will alone begins to dissolve. You stop bearing the burden of figuring everything out by yourself, forcing solutions through sheer mental effort, or carrying the anxiety of whether things will work out. The transformation in how you experience challenges isn't subtle. It's tangible, practical, immediate. Your decisions begin flowing from a different place, not from fear and control, but from trust and recognition. Here's something I want you to understand about the fact that you're here right now, having stayed through this entire exploration. This isn't random. The fact that these words are resonating with something deep inside you, that you haven't clicked away to scroll through more superficial content, that something within you recognizes the truth we've been uncovering, that's significant. You're not accidentally stumbling upon spiritual teachings that challenge everything you've been taught. You're awakening to what has always been true about you, what Jesus was desperately trying to reveal when he declared, "I am." The hidden truth isn't about worshipping a distant deity from your knees. It's about recognizing the very nature of your own divine being that's been waiting your entire life to be acknowledged and expressed through your unique perspective and experience. If you're feeling the significance of this moment and this recognition, write in the comments, "This awakening was meant for me." If you've made it this far, I want you to know something. This conversation we've had matters to me. I share these insights every week because I've witnessed the profound transformation that happens when people finally understand what Jesus was actually revealing about divine identity. Not following from a distance, but recognizing within ourselves what he recognized within himself. If this exploration shifted something in how you see yourself and your relationship with the divine, I'd love for you to become part of this community by subscribing. Every video we create here goes deeper into these life-changing principles that most spiritual teachings overlook or misinterpret. We're not here to repeat what you've already heard 1,000 times. We're uncovering the hidden truths that actually transform how you experience existence. And if something within you truly resonated as we explored the real meaning behind "I am," let me know you made it to the end by simply writing in the comments, "I recognize my divine nature." That way, I know this message found the right person at the right time, because these aren't random encounters. You're here for a reason. That gentle tap on the like button also helps these teachings reach others who might be searching for exactly this understanding right now, wondering if there's more to spirituality than the separation consciousness they've been taught. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to actually live from this divine consciousness when facing real challenges and difficult decisions. Click and continue with me there as we uncover more of what it truly means to embody "I am" in your everyday life.